The night air was unusually still as Claire Matthews stepped off the last bus at Hollow Pine, a remote village nestled between mountains and fog. She was a freelance journalist chasing a long-abandoned railway mystery, the case of Train 109, which vanished in 1983 with all passengers aboard. No remains, no wreckage, just gone. She booked a room at the old Hillcroft Inn, a timber-frame lodge that leaned with age. The innkeeper, Mrs. Hawthorne, was a bony woman with hollow cheeks and eyes too wide for comfort. She handed Claire an iron key with a yellowed tag. Room 7. "You're here for the train, aren't you?" she asked in a tone that wasn't a question. Claire paused. "Yes, I'm writing about the disappearance." Mrs. Hawthorne didn't blink. "If you hear the whistle, don't follow it, no matter how close it sounds." Claire forced a polite smile and turned toward the staircase. Behind her, the innkeeper whispered something under her breath, but Claire caught only one word: return. The room smelled of mildew and lavender sachets as if someone tried to mask decay. She unpacked and opened her notebook, jotting down notes. Missing railway, last known location, ridge near Hollow Creek Tunnel, and reports of an iron screech on moonless nights. As the hour edged past midnight, Claire heard it. A long, hollow whistle, distant but unmistakable. She stood, heart tapping against her ribs. Curiosity beat fear. She grabbed her flashlight and voice recorder, left a note on her nightstand, and stepped out into the fog-wrapped road. The air felt heavier with each step. Branches above twisted like bones, and even the crickets had gone silent. The sound came again, closer now. The whistle wasn't from any modern train. It was older, hollow, like it came through water and time. She followed the overgrown tracks past the station ruins, then down a ravine toward Hollow Creek Tunnel, its mouth yawning wide like an open grave. A red glow pulsed deep inside. Claire hesitated, then clicked on her recorder. "This is Claire Matthews. August 4th. I've reached the entrance to Hollow Creek Tunnel. There's a light inside. It shouldn't be there." She stepped into the tunnel. Her flashlight flickered. Inside, the temperature dropped instantly. Her breath fogged. The walls lined with soot and handprints seemed to absorb light. Then she saw it. On the tracks ahead stood a rusted black locomotive. Train 109. Its windows were shattered, but flickers of movement danced behind them. Claire inched closer. The whistle blew again, this time so loud it rattled her bones. A thick fog spewed from the train's cabin, and out of it stepped a conductor. He wore a hat soaked in blood and a uniform eaten by rot. His face was wrong. Too long, no lips, just yellow teeth and hollow sockets. "Ticket," he rasped, holding out a skeletal hand. Claire backed away. "This isn't real. It's a hallucination. This isn't—" The conductor's head twitched. All aboard. The return ride. Behind him, silhouettes filled the train. Passengers with broken necks, sunken eyes, black veins. Children, old men. A pregnant woman holding her belly with one hand and someone else's severed arm in the other. All of them stared at Claire. The train hissed. A door opened. Something wet slithered down the steps and began to crawl toward her. Claire ran. The tunnel twisted around her like intestines. No matter how fast she moved, the whistle was always behind her. Screams echoed down the walls, hundreds of them, layered and tangled. A child screamed her name. "Claire!" She stumbled out of the tunnel, collapsed on the gravel, and turned around. The tunnel was gone. Just trees, dirt, no tracks, no train. At dawn, a park ranger found her lying unconscious near the woods, fingernails torn, lips blue. She was taken to the local hospital. She didn't speak for 3 days. When she finally did, all she said was, "They're still in there." Back in her motel room, her belongings were undisturbed, except the note on her nightstand, the one she left before following the sound. It now had something else scribbled beneath her handwriting in black coal-like strokes. Return trip, 1 passenger short. The recorder she carried was found in her coat pocket. It played a full 7-minute recording of static, followed by train wheels screeching, a child crying, and a voice whispering, "Next time, don't run." Claire left Hollow Pine the next day. She never wrote the article. She never spoke about the train again. But a week later, in her Chicago apartment, she heard it again. A distant midnight whistle, closer this time, and the voice of the conductor echoing from her hallway mirror. "All tickets. Our round trip." They say the sound of the bell only rings after midnight, and only for those marked to die. I never believed in village folklore, not even the legend of Widow Crane, who hanged herself in 1903 from the chapel bell rope, cursing everyone who watched her suffer in silence. The old chapel had been sealed ever since. But when I received an anonymous letter from my estranged uncle inviting me to Hollowmere with the message, "If you want to know what happened to your father, come alone on August 4th, I went. The village was ghostly, sunken into a fog that never seemed to lift. The houses leaned with age. People watched from behind drawn curtains. Hollowmere hadn't changed since my father disappeared 27 years ago. I stayed at a weather-beaten inn called the Greythorn. My room had a view of the chapel tower. Even in daylight, it loomed like a coffin propped against the sky. The bell hadn't rung in decades until that night. It started at 12:03 a.m., a single chime. I sat bolt upright. My chest tightened. I hadn't been asleep, just lying there, listening to the wind drag its nails across the window panes. But that sound, cold, deep, and impossibly loud. It came from the chapel. Another chime followed. Then another. 3 total. Each more distant than the last, as if time was folding inward. Something compelled me to go. I threw on my coat, grabbed the lantern by the door, and left without locking up. The streets were empty. The fog coiled low like smoke from graves. As I neared the chapel, the wind stopped. Every sound, the trees, the insects, the night itself, froze. The chapel gate was open. Inside, dust blanketed everything in centuries. Candles long melted into bone-colored wax puddles. But the bell rope swayed gently above the pulpit. Something in the air reeked of damp soil and old metal. There was a staircase behind the altar spiraling upward into the bell tower. I climbed. Halfway up, I saw it, scratched into the wall in deep, ragged letters. "She rings for blood." My breath caught. When I reached the top, the bell stood silent. Massive, green with rot. A noose still hung beside it, blackened by age, fibers stiff with something darker than time. Then I saw the floor. Fresh footprints. Bare, small, leading in circles, then stopping just inches behind where I now stood. My lantern flickered. A whisper hissed directly into my ear. "Welcome back." I turned. Nothing. But I was no longer alone. A woman stood beneath the bell, hair like drowned weeds, skin white and wet. Her eyes, no whites, just black holes that pulsed and moved like ink underwater. Her dress clung to her bones, torn where the rope had cut her neck, and around her neck was a line so deep it looked like her head had been sewn back on. She opened her mouth and let out a sound that did not belong in this world. A guttural metallic scream, as if a bell were ringing from inside her chest. I couldn't move. My body locked. Something ancient gripped my spine. She stepped toward me, feet not touching the ground. Her face was inches from mine. Then she whispered, "Your father heard the bell too." I blacked out. I woke up in my room, sweating. The time, 12:03 p.m. Had it been a dream? No. My boots were still muddy. A faint rope mark ringed my neck. That evening, I went to the town archives. The librarian, a frail man with shaking hands, stared at me too long before handing me a folder. Inside were 3 photographs. One of my father at the chapel steps, one of the bell tower rope soaked in blood, and one last photo, too blurry to be real. A face, white and eyeless, peering from the belfry. The librarian spoke softly. "She chose him. like she chooses one every 27 years. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My hands shook too much to hold the papers. That night, I locked myself in. At 12:03 a.m., the bell rang again. I knew then, once you hear it, you're marked. I needed to leave, but the roads were closed, swallowed by mist. Every villager I met in the morning turned away or closed their doors. No one helped. No one acknowledged what I now knew. They were all survivors of her bell, and they knew I wouldn't be one. The next night, I packed and waited for dawn. I sat with every light on, the bell tower outside my window glaring down like a watchful god. At 12:03 a.m., the lights died. All of them. And the bell rang. Only once. But this time, she came through the wall. Her face melted in grief. She sobbed blood. Her voice filled the room with rust and screams from another time. I backed into the closet, panting, clutching a crucifix I didn't believe in. She whispered through the keyhole, "Why did they let me die?" Then the door creaked open without sound. She was inches from my face, and in her hand she held an old photo of my father, burning. I don't remember escaping the inn. I just remember running through the fog toward the woods, toward anything. The trees groaned. Bells clanged in the distance. Faces blinked between branches. I saw my father, mouth sewn shut, eyes bleeding, reaching out from a tree hollow. I screamed until my throat tore. Then I tripped, fell, and landed in a clearing with old stones, graves, dozens of them, all unmarked, except one, mine. Now I live here, in Hollowmere, not quite dead, not quite alive. The villagers nod at me now, their eyes empty. They know I'm one of hers, one of the marked, one who heard the bell. They say she rings it once for warning, twice for hunting, thrice for the claiming, and once it tolls for you, it never forgets, never forgives. Because Widow Crane doesn't just haunt the chapel, she lives in the sound, and sound never dies. My name is Thomas Grail, and I was 12 years old the first time I saw him, the Ragman. It happened in the summer of 1997, the year my parents inherited my grandfather's crumbling estate in St. Hollow, a forgotten patch of countryside in upstate New York. The manor was monstrous, tall and narrow with shuttered windows and a widow's walk on top, the kind of house that even the sun avoided after noon. It had belonged to my grandfather, a recluse no one had seen in his final 10 years. We arrived on a wet Thursday. My father grumbled about rotten floors and my mother pretended not to hear whispers through the walls. I didn't care. I just wanted to explore. I had a flashlight, a bag of crackers, and the courage only a preteen boy could possess. The basement was off limits. That was the first rule my dad gave me, which of course meant it was the first place I tried to enter. But the basement door was nailed shut with rusted iron strips, and scrawled across the wood, over and over again, was a word I didn't recognize at first. Ragman. I asked my mother what it meant. Her face went pale. "Never say that again," she said, and that was it. That night the storm rolled in. I couldn't sleep. My room was next to the attic and I swore I heard footsteps overhead. Slow, dragging. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and whispered that it was just the wind. Until I heard the voice, a gravelly whisper just outside my door. "Some children. Don't wake up." I bolted upright. The hallway was dark. No footsteps, no sounds. I stayed frozen until sunrise. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Dead birds appeared on the front steps. My toothbrush was found inside the oven. My little sister Emily said someone was whispering to her through the keyhole at night. My parents called it stress, said the house was old and we were imagining things, but Emily changed. She stopped speaking in full sentences. She stared at corners and giggled at nothing. She drew pictures of a man made entirely of rags, torn cloth wrapped around a too long body with empty sockets for eyes and a mouth like a tear in burlap. She called him her friend, the Ragman. One evening I followed her. She walked out the back door in her nightgown, barefoot across the cold grass. The moon was a sliver, and fog curled low around the yard. She headed straight to the shed behind the house, one we never opened because the lock was rusted shut. Except now the door was wide open. I followed her in. The air inside was thick, suffocating. It smelled like mildew and old paper. She stood still, her back to me. "Emily," I whispered. She didn't turn. Then she whispered, "He's real." The door slammed behind me. My flashlight flickered, and I saw him. In the far corner, barely visible, an impossibly tall figure. His limbs were too long, swaddled in blackened rags. His hands hung to his knees, fingers wrapped in gauze. His face was a patchwork of cloth, stitched with rusted thread, and beneath it, 2 holes that sucked in the light. He didn't walk toward me. He glided, no feet, no sound. Emily began to hum, a soft, tuneless lullaby. I backed into the door screaming, but it wouldn't open. The ragman stopped inches from my face. Then he tilted his head and said, in a voice that rattled my bones, "Would you like to be stitched?" I don't remember getting out. I only remember waking up in my bed with mud on my sheets and Emily sleeping soundly beside me. The next day, she was gone. We searched the house, the woods, the town. Police came. Divers scoured the nearby lake. My parents broke down, but I knew. He took her, and I never saw her again. My parents never spoke of it. We moved away before summer ended, and the manor was sold to someone from out of state. I grew up, tried to forget, told myself it was trauma, that grief invented monsters, until last week. My wife Claire and I had just moved into our new house in New Hampshire. We were unpacking boxes when I found something jammed inside a vent in the upstairs hallway. A child's drawing. Old. Yellowed. It was Emily's. And it was him. The ragman. Same rags, same mouth, same hollow eyes. But this time the picture showed 2 children, and underneath, in Emily's handwriting, "He waits for you too." That night the air turned cold. My dog refused to enter the upstairs hallway. My wife said she heard someone singing in the attic. I didn't sleep. At 3:13 a.m., I woke to the sound of cloth tearing. I turned toward the foot of my bed. He was there. Rags dragging on the floor, arms reaching, trembling, as if fighting the urge to grab. His head twitched slowly toward me. I couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. Then he whispered, "One child lost, 1 grown remains. Debt must be even." Now I see him everywhere, in the mirror behind the fog, in reflections that don't move when I do. I hear his stitching at night, the pull of thread, the sound of metal needles scraping bone. Last night I found a note beside my pillow, written in blood-red ink. A stitch for every secret, a tear for every scream. Soon, Thomas, soon. I burned it. But this morning my wife woke up with a line of thread stitched into her wrist, and I knew, he's not just a memory, he's coming to collect. If you're reading this, and you hear the sound of rags dragging across your floor tonight, don't open your eyes. Don't move. Because if you do, the ragman might ask if you'd like to be stitched too, and he never asks twice. When I was 15, my mother took a job caring for an elderly man named Mr. Calhoun, a retired magician with failing health and a reputation soaked in mystery. His house stood alone on the outskirts of Grenton Hollow, surrounded by woods that even birds avoided. It was called the Mirror House, not because of its reflections, but because every room, every hallway, every surface had mirrors. No 2 were the same. Some were tall and cracked. Others were oval, warped, fogged with age. They hung like ghosts, watching everything, catching every glance from every direction. I remember the first time we stepped inside. The front door creaked open as if it hadn't in years. A thick scent of lavender and something fouler like spoiled meat hung in the air. The walls were lined with framed faces of strangers who didn't look quite human. Their eyes were too wide, their smiles too long. Mr. Calhoun greeted us from a crimson velvet chair, frail and sunken, his fingers covered in silver rings. "You must never look into a mirror at night," he whispered, voice barely a breath. "Especially not after midnight." My mother laughed it off. I didn't. Over the weeks that followed, I spent many evenings at the Mirror House. While my mother administered his medicine and helped him dress, I roamed the halls. The mirrors unnerved me. Sometimes they felt delayed, like the reflection hesitated half a second too long before mimicking my movement. Other times I saw things in the reflection that weren't there behind me. Shapes, shadows, a flash of red hair that didn't belong to anyone in the house. One night I got bold, or maybe just stupid. I stood before a tall antique mirror in the hallway outside Mr. Calhoun's room. It had a gilded frame and claw-like feet at the base. Midnight had just passed, and I remembered his warning. But I was a teenager. Warnings are invitations when you're that age. I stared into the mirror and whispered, "Is anyone there?" My breath fogged the glass. Nothing happened. I laughed and turned to walk away. Then my reflection didn't move. I froze. It stood still as I stepped back, mocking me. I raised my hand. It didn't. Instead, it tilted its head, slowly, unnaturally. Then it smiled. My real face was frozen in terror, but the reflection wore a grin wide enough to split its skin. And its eyes, they weren't mine. They were too dark, hollow and dripping like ink. Then it reached out, from inside the mirror. Its hand pressed against the inside of the glass, fingers distorted and thin, nails blackened. I screamed and fell backward. The mirror cracked, only once, and the reflection vanished. The next day, Mr. Calhoun refused to speak. He stared at me with horror and muttered something over and over. You woke her. He died that night. We stayed at the house until his relatives arrived. My mother insisted on staying one more night to finalize paperwork. I begged her to leave, but she wouldn't. That night, the mirrors began whispering. I could hear them from every wall. Murmurs, breathing. I covered them with bedsheets, towels, anything I could find. But I missed one, an old hand mirror lying face down in the attic. I found it after the whispers grew louder. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did. As soon as I turned it over, I saw her. A girl, maybe my age, maybe not. Hard to tell. Her face was pale as snow, her lips sewn shut with silver thread. Her eyes were raw red, as if they had cried glass. She stood behind me. I turned. No one. I looked back into the mirror. Closer. She wasn't behind me anymore. She was inside the mirror, pressing her stitched face against the glass, begging me to set her free with eyes that bled silently. The mirror's surface rippled, then cracked. Hair, long, soaked, tangled, spilled out through the opening. Fingers followed. She began to crawl out, dragging her stitched lips across the floor, her hands grasping blindly like a newborn in darkness. I ran, screaming. My mother met me in the hallway, startled. I tried to explain. She didn't believe me. Until she saw the blood trail. We left that night. We never returned. The Mirror House was sold, then abandoned, eventually condemned. But I never forgot her. Years later in college, I passed an antique store downtown. In the window, I saw it. The same hand mirror, still cracked, still breathing. I stared for too long. My reflection began to smile again, but I wasn't. It's with me now. I locked it in a box, sealed it in concrete, buried it in the woods. But I still hear the whispers at night. Sometimes my reflection doesn't blink when I do. Sometimes she almost gets out. And sometimes I see other people in my mirror, people I don't know, people screaming, begging. Maybe you're next. If your reflection ever smiles before you do, run and never look back. I never knew my grandfather well. He was a quiet man with deep-set eyes and a limp in his right leg, the kind of person who walked like the floor offended him. My family rarely visited him at his old farmhouse in Wyoming Creek, and I understood why the moment I stepped foot inside it. The place was wrong. Not just dusty or old, but wrong, like it had been waiting too long for something to come back. He died in early autumn. My mother inherited the property and insisted we visit for a weekend to pack up what was left. It was supposed to be routine, but I should have known better the moment I found the hidden trapdoor in the parlor floor. It was covered by a thick wool rug that smelled like mothballs and wet iron. I discovered it on the first night while cleaning. My flashlight hit a seam in the wooden floorboards. I lifted the rug, and there it was, a square iron hatch with no handle, only an etched symbol, a circle with 3 lines piercing it like a sun stabbed by arrows. I called for my mother. She stood at the threshold, eyes fixed on the hatch, silent. "You knew about this?" I asked. Her lips parted, but only a single word escaped. "No." Then she turned and walked away, whispering something I couldn't hear. I didn't open it that night. I should have left it alone. That evening, the house moaned. Not creaked, moaned. Like something alive beneath the floor was turning in its sleep. My bedroom faced the orchard. Wind tapped against the glass, but it wasn't the sound that kept me awake. It was the knocking. From underneath. Soft at first, then louder. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more. I pressed my ear to the floor. Breathing. Wet. Slow. Breathing. I told my mom in the morning. She didn't respond, just sipped her tea with eyes locked on the kitchen wall. I noticed something strange. Her left hand trembled uncontrollably and she kept scratching her wrist until the skin bled. Later that day, I returned to the hatch. I don't know why. Curiosity is a curse worse than fear. I pressed my ear to it. Silence. Then, scraping, as if nails dragged across the underside of the iron. Then a whisper. "Let me see again." I jumped back. The air turned cold. My breath fogged. I slammed the rug back over the hatch and ran. "That night," my mother screamed. I ran to her room and found her standing on the bed, eyes wide, pointing at the floor. "He's out," she whispered. "He's out, he's out, he's out." She began clawing at her face, sobbing. I had to slap her to stop. She collapsed into my arms, muttering the same phrase over and over. The room beneath. I called for help. No signal. The landline was dead. We were trapped. And the knocking started again. But this time, it didn't stop. It echoed through the entire house like something was walking beneath the floorboards. I followed the sound room to room, until I heard it scraping right under my bed. I ran outside. At sunrise, I tried to break open the hatch. I grabbed a crowbar from the barn, wedged it into the seam, and pulled. It wouldn't budge. Not even an inch. That's when I noticed the air above the hatch rippling like heat waves. And the symbol. It was bleeding. Dark red fluid oozed from the iron, forming shapes that looked like runes. I blinked, and they vanished. I looked up and saw something in the mirror over the mantel. Someone was standing behind me, not my reflection. A man, tall, pale, eyes like oil. But when I turned, no one. Only the sound of footsteps going downstairs that weren't supposed to exist. That night, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I opened the trap door. I don't know how it came loose, but it was ajar when I found it. The rug had been pulled back. A foul stench crawled out, like rot and burnt teeth. My flashlight flickered as I leaned in. There were stairs, narrow wooden spiral stairs going down into blackness. I called for my mother. No answer. I should have run. I should have boarded it up, but I went down. The air grew colder with every step. My light barely pierced the dark. The walls were carved with strange symbols, circles, eyes, open mouths, things with too many limbs. The staircase ended in front of a wooden door, swollen and black with mold. I pushed it open. The room beneath was A mirror of the house. Exact. Same furniture, same paintings, but wrong. The colors were faded, shadows moved without light. And on the walls, hundreds of photos. Of me. Sleeping, eating, brushing my teeth. Photos that could only have been taken from inside the walls. I turned and saw my mother. She was hanging from the ceiling, tied up with vines made of hair. Her eyes were open, lips torn. She tried to speak, but her tongue was missing. Then I saw him. The man from the mirror. He didn't walk. He drifted across the floor like smoke. His mouth split open from ear to ear, filled with chattering teeth that didn't match. His fingers were too long, bending backward, twitching like they were remembering pain. He spoke in a voice that wasn't his alone. Dozens of voices, layered, whispering in unison. You looked for me. Now I see you. The walls closed in. The lights went out. I ran. Up the stairs, through the hatch, slammed it shut. My mother was gone. The rug was back in place, and my watch stopped at 3:33 a.m. I left the next morning, never returned, but I still dream of it. The knocking hasn't stopped. Sometimes I hear it beneath my bed. 3 knocks, then silence, then a whisper. Let me see again. If you ever find a trapdoor with a symbol etched in its face, leave it. Whatever lives below isn't meant to see the world above, and it never forgets your face once you show it yours.